Often the best way to gauge SMSF sector concerns is through feedback from practitioners themselves. Mark Ellen from Mercurium joins me today to share what he is seeing in the industry at the moment. Hello, Mark. Great to see you. Welcome today.
Thanks, Darren. Wonderful once again to join you.
Now let's get stuck into it. The New Year's ticked over as we know, and that means that we're actually over the halfway mark of the 2023-24 income year. So what are the biggest challenges practitioners are facing right now as they are communicating to you?
Well, Darren, I think we see one challenge that appears each and every year is meeting lodgement deadlines. Now, firstly, it's getting used to this new quarterly transfer balance cap reporting for all SMSFs. Yes. The 23-24 year, this current year, this is our first year where the concept of annual TBA reporting SMSFs just simply doesn't exist anymore. So all transfer balance account events, if we look at for the period, the 6-month period, 1 July to 31 December 2023, across all SMSFs, all those TBA events that occurred in that period should have already been reported by now. So that's any retirement phase pensions that commenced, any commutations, pensions that reverted, and don't forget that includes a transition to retirement pension that was not in retirement phase but moved into retirement phase, whether that was because the member turned 65, met a full condition of release, or unfortunately died and it reverted to a surviving spouse. And then on the topic of reversionary pensions, I still see some confusion about the 12-month deferral rule. Now, practitioners have got to remember, it only applies to the timing of the credit arising in the reversionary beneficiary's transfer balance account, and it doesn't affect the reporting deadline. So if a pension reverted on 1 December last year in 2023, it has to have been reported by 28 January this year, but the transfer balance credit will not arise in the reversionary's transfer balance account until 1 December this year. So again, it's the 12 months defers when the credit arises in the reversionary beneficiary's transfer balance account, not the obligation for the fund to report the transfer balance account event. Now, the other fast approaching deadline is the one for SMSFs that were established in the 22-23 financial year. Their first SMSF annual return is due 28 February, just around the corner. For SMSFs that were established prior to 22-23 and don't have any outstanding prior year returns, they're up to date with their lodgements. Generally, they'll have until 15 May this year to lodge their 23 SMSF annual return. And just one last reminder, the SMSF annual return cannot be lodged until the audit has been completed and that final audit report issued.
Well, it's understandable they're taking time to adjust to some of those changes because they are quite drastic in the way that practitioners have been working or used to working in the past. Okay, what about some technical issues? There's always technical issues, isn't there? And there's been a lot of legislative change recently. So how are advisors and accountants adapting to them?
Yeah, that's true, Darren. I think there's always the concern and importantly, the challenge of regulatory change, keeping up to date with changes when they apply, how they not only affect clients, but also how they affect the practitioner's or advisor's own firm. A change to superannuation rules could mean that a process has to be reviewed and amended, or even a whole new process implemented to ensure clients don't fall foul of a new measure, or that it's managed from a compliance aspect. For example, the change I just talked about regarding quarterly transfer balance account reporting. Now, let's take one other change. Let's talk about the change to non-arm's length income rules, or as I like to call it, the gift that just keeps on giving. These changes, which was mainly the introduction of the concept of non-arm's length expenditure, took effect way back on 1 July 2018. Now, since then, we've had draft rulings, final rulings, a consultation paper, a draft bill released for consultation, a bill tabled in the lower house in mid-September last year and now sitting in the Senate. This is the bill that's sitting in the Senate to enact the changes, including the 2x factor for non-arm's length expenditure that's general in nature, amongst other things, that are supposed to have applied since 1 July last year. So we're coming up to 6 years after these amendments were supposed to apply or do in fact apply, and we're still not 100% sure on how they work. Now, I liken that to asking two teams to go out onto a footy field and play football, and they all turn around to you and say, but what code are we playing? AFL, rugby, rugby league, soccer? And you reply, I'll tell you at halftime. So, on the non-arm's length rules, though, I have noticed an uptick on the application for private binding rulings. One of the things I like to do, Darren, is review what type of application for private binding rulings are being submitted by taxpayers. Always fun. And there's been an uptick on the number of private binding ruling applications made in relation to non-arm's length expenditure, and with a particular focus on the capacity. Whether the service provided by the trustee was considered to be in their capacity as trustee, and thus no non-arm's length expenditure issues, or if it was provided in their personal capacity, which would require an arm's length price to be paid for the service provided. Otherwise, the NALI provisions would apply. Now, interestingly, these PBRs I've looked at all involve the provision of accounting and tax preparation services. Wow. So I'm sure it's going to be a concern for many practitioners who have their own SMSF, as well as those SMSF clients that may be affected by this measure and these new rules, which, again, we're still waiting to be formally finalised.
Yeah, that's an incredible challenge for practitioners, particularly when they're looking after their own SMSFs as well, as you just mentioned. Now, NALI and NALI with an E as well as NALI with an I has been a contentious issue for a long time, going back to 2018, as you mentioned. But there's another policy change which no one can stop talking about, and that's the new tax on $3 million total super balances, or total super balances over $3 million, proposed change at the moment. Are you witness any preparation so far from practitioners to anticipate what they might have to do to manage this measure?
I'd say that it's definitely part of the conversations that practitioners and advisors are having with clients, obviously, particularly with those who have more than 3 million in super at the moment, or expect to have 3 million either when the measure comes in or soon after. Remember that at the moment under the bill, the proposed measure, the 3 million threshold is not subject to indexation. So we're likely to see more and more become subject to this measure once it comes into place. Now, the conversations are probably more around how we expect the measure to apply to them, rather than actually taking action now. Again, it doesn't apply until the 25-26 financial year, and we still don't have all the rules. Taking action now may be premature. Of course, one of the conversation topics will be whether a person should continue to hold capital inside of superannuation, whether that be in its entirety or above a certain amount, 3 million. Remember, superannuation is a tax structure, and it provides tax concessions as a trade-off for the rules and restrictions that apply to superannuation. Start stripping away those concessions, and people may rethink whether superannuation is the right tax structure to build and hold their retirement wealth. So, as we approach the start date, and once the bill is passed and we know all of the rules, I expect practitioners and advisors will become very busy with assisting their clients on how this measure will affect them.
Yeah, I have absolutely no doubt that will be the case, Mark. And of course, everything will gain urgency as we progress towards that deadline of implementation. And then, yes, I think there'll be some frenetic action going on in the lead up to that.
Yeah. What's that saying, Darren? We leave things to the last minute?
Well, in a lot of ways, we have to, because we don't actually have the full picture until we get to the last minute. So there's not really much you can do in those circumstances.
Well, exactly as I just mentioned, probably premature to start taking action now because it's not the law. It doesn't apply to 25, 26, and there's still a lot of the rules that are yet to be clarified. So we have to wait.
Yeah, interesting times, and they will be interesting times leading up to 1 July 2025. Now, just from a more general perspective, are there any other noticeable subjects that are being raised via the Aquarium Help Desk, which is a great facility for you to be able to monitor sort of what's going on with practitioners and what's troubling them in their minds?
No, you're right there, Darren. It provides some interesting scenarios and some fabulous questions. We've been operating the help desk for now nearly a year, and we've had over 700 questions submitted, which keeps the Aquarium tech team well and truly busy and also on our toes. We've also got Leanne Hayes, who's joined us, a tax specialist. So we've widened it to not just SMSF questions, but tax-related questions as well. Now, from a superannuation compliance perspective, we've had a large proportion of questions focusing on investment compliance rules in SIS, in the super law, particularly around investing in another entity, or whether that entity is a related party, as you know, the in-house asset rules will apply. We've seen from the ATO's own stats about contraventions. Contravention of in-house assets is quite high. We also see a number of questions around SMSFs acquiring an asset and the application of the Section 66 prohibition on a super trustee intentionally acquiring an asset from a related party, and whether one of the exceptions should apply. That's a very important rule not to breach. As you know, you read down the bottom of that section, Darren, for the penalty for a breach of Section 66, and it's 1 year's free room and board at His Majesty's Hotel. Probably not one that anyone would want to experience. Dealing with the death of an SMS member is another topic we get lots of questions on, you know, focusing on the compliance requirements. For example, who's the trustee, or who can be the trustee or director? Does the SMSF still comply with the SMSF definition? Understanding the legal personal representative exception rule. When does the death benefit need to be paid? You know, does it have to be paid out within 6 months? Or can we take longer? Can it be paid via an in-specie payment, or does it have to be in cash, particularly where the SMSF has real estate and it represents a large portion of the fund? Will the death benefit be subject to withholding? What are the PAYG withholding obligations and requirements? And also considering whether the fund can claim a tax deduction under the future service liability provision in the Tax Act. So as we always know, death is always a topic that provides a lot of interest and also sometimes a lot of controversy and a lot of cases around it. And finally, we've actually recently seen a spike in GST-related questions, both involving SMSFs and other entity types. Again, from an SMSF perspective, it usually involves where the trustees of the fund are looking at subdividing an existing property that the fund owns and whether or not GST applies. You know, it's just a reminder that there's more than just the super compliance rules that need to be considered when looking at fund transactions. So Darren, pretty much a banquet of topics, interesting scenarios for the tech team to get their teeth into.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for that discussion, Mark. Mark will be sharing more insights, including some war stories, at the SMSF Professionals Day 2024, co-hosted by Self-Managed Super and Aquarium. It's a 3-city roadshow commencing in Melbourne on the 21st of May and concluding in Brisbane on the 28th of May. There will also be an online component. To find out more about the event and register, please reference the details you can see on screen now. Well, thanks again, Mark, and I can't wait to hear more of these stories at the SMSF Professionals Day.
I'm sure we'll have a heap to discuss and share with audiences, and it's going to be a great event for everyone to come along and attend.